Hi, I'm Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, and I've got a very special video for you today. We're going to be interviewing Peter Schweizer, who I believe is the most important journalist working in the United States at this time. He also happens to be a senior contributor to Breitbart News and the author of many best-selling books, the latest, Profiles in Corruption, essential reading. It is the gateway into understanding not just Joe Biden and the Biden family, but also the entire institutional Democratic Party at this moment and their corruption. And today what we're going to do is I'm going to try to paint a picture for you with Peter about not just Hunter Biden, but what we call the Biden Five. This is what I believe is indisputable evidence that Joe Biden is running a crime-like syndicate where he is, if nothing else, enabling his family members to get rich without really any noticeable skills using the American people's good name. Without any further delay, let's get into Peter. But before we do, thank you so much for making Breitbart one of the top 5 news outlets in all the United States, according to Amazon.com, owned Alexa.com. So thank you. We don't do any advertising. It's all word of mouth. So you guys sharing our content, making us among the top 2 websites in the entire United States media landscape on Facebook, on debate nights for the last several debates. Pretty amazing stuff, and it's all thanks to you all sharing our content and making us as big as we are. We really appreciate it, and thanks for all you do to help share the stuff. Peter, let's get to it. Joe Biden, here is the premise. He is the top dog of a family that is really engaging in, if not criminal acts, clear acts of corruption. Lay out that premise for me, and then I've got some specifics for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to join you, Alex. No, there's no question about it. Joe Biden is the planet around which the moons of his family travel. And the gravitational pull is Joe Biden's power and his position. And the family has enriched themselves based on the positions he has. And one of the most dramatic ways you can notice that, Alex, is quite simply that before Joe Biden is vice president of the United States, they're really not doing many international deals. But once Joe Biden becomes vice president of the United States, suddenly they've got foreign governments and foreign entities falling over themselves to cut them in on deals that they have no background or no expertise in. So there's a direct link between the corrupt acts of the family and the policy positions and power that Joe Biden has.
And we're going to demonstrate what I believe is a pattern of unskilled Biden family members getting deals, particularly international deals, in particular while he was vice president. And let's start with the most famous of the Biden Five, and that is Hunter Biden. And why don't we begin with the fact that he cut deals with Russia, with China, with Kazakhstan? Where do you want to begin, Peter?
Yeah, it's a veritable United Nations of corruption. And the thing you have to know is that before Joe Biden becomes vice president of the United States, Hunter Biden is a lobbyist for online gambling companies in Europe. That's what he's doing. That's his professional background. Once his dad becomes vice president of the United States, he suddenly starts doing a whole host of global deals. Begin with China, for example. He flies with his dad on Air Force Two to Beijing, China. In December of 2013, within 10 days of that trip, Hunter Biden joins the board of directors and gets an equity stake in a Chinese government-financed investment firm called BHR Partners, Bohai Harvest RST. He has no background in private equity. He has no background in China. They put him on the board precisely because his father is vice president and precisely because his father is taking pro-China positions on the global stage. There are other deals in China. There's a real estate entity that he is part owner of called Rosemont Realty, Rosemont Real Estate. There's an email of Hunter Biden writing to Chinese people that he knows, officials, and saying, I want to sell my real estate company. Within a matter of months, there are emails that demonstrate they get a quote unquote unsolicited bid from a Chinese company called Gemini that has close ties to the Chinese military. So there's deal number 2. And we now know that there were other deals involving CEFC, which is a Chinese energy company tied close to the Chinese military. So that's just China. Should I keep going, Alex, to the other countries?
No, and let's mention Joe Biden's role in this, because Joe Biden has acted as though he is not a part of any of these deals. He wasn't even aware of any of these deals. And yet, on at least one occasion, Hunter Biden was on Air Force Two with him before cutting a deal But this was one of the things that got illuminated a little bit this week with all of these revelations, some broken by the New York Post, others by Breitbart, of actual emails from Hunter Biden and associates. And it does appear as though it was crystal clear on the Chinese behalf that they did not think that they were going to get a return on investment from their deals with Hunter Biden. It was clearly an influence play. But what was the truth? What's exactly in the emails, Peter?
Well, what's exactly in the emails is that Hunter Biden's business partners were quite explicit that he doesn't bring anything to the table. He's not bringing in any money. He's not bringing expertise. He is the, quote, pipeline to the administration, meaning the Obama-Biden administration. Why is that important? Well, when you start talking about these China deals involving BHR, this is a Chinese state-funded investment fund with the son of the vice president on the board of directors that is acquiring high technology companies in the United States that create what are called dual use technologies that have a civilian purpose, but they can also have a military purpose. And guess what, Alex? That means that those deals have to be approved by what? By the Obama administration. So there's a very clear reason why the Chinese government wants the son of the vice president sitting on their board involved in these deals, because they need the approval of the Obama-Biden administration, which is, of course, what they get when they start acquiring these companies. So it's a very specific purpose. The emails lay that out. They talk about that the deals that they're involved in get what they call the Biden bump, which is the boost that they get from the Biden affiliation. And there's no question that Joe Biden knew about these deals. He said for a very long time that he never discussed any of the business deals with Hunter, but we now know that Hunter himself said that he talked to his dad about it. And we know that Chinese executives told the New Yorker that they met Joe Biden on that famous trip on Air Force Two, wow. And they talked to him. So he's just simply not telling the truth.
And so he flat out lied to the American public when he said that he had never discussed these deals.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is the funny thing, Alex. I mean, we've been reporting on this at Breitbart and in the books that I write since 2018. And it's really quite remarkable to step back and look and see the fallback positions as they've rolled them out. When we first reported on this in 2018, they said these deals never happened. They're a conspiracy theory. Then we showed the deals happened. So then what was their next fallback position? It was, well, Hunter was really not a major player. We showed that Hunter was on the board of directors and he had an equity stake. Then they said, well, Hunter might have been a party, but he never discussed them with his father. Then, of course, we demonstrated, and it's been shown now numerous times, that he did talk to his father about him. So what was the Biden position, the Joe Biden position in the debate? It was, I have not received any money personally from these deals. So you see,
I think what we're going to demonstrate over the course of the video, Peter, is that that's not the point we're trying to make. It appears as though there's a possibility Joe did make money, and that will be investigated, hopefully, and hopefully we'll get to the bottom of that. But that's not the point. The point is that he's not denying that his family members used his name or his supposedly good name in order to enrich themselves off of the American people.
That's exactly right. And Alex, let's be clear about this. When you look at a law like bribery law, for example, if you're a senator from the state of California and I want to bribe you, Alex, if I pay you the money directly or I paid it to, one of your adult kids, it doesn't matter. A bribe is a bribe. The transference of money is transference of money. So this notion that I personally did not make any money is irrelevant if all your family members around you are the conduits for an influence operation involving the Chinese government, Russian oligarchs, Ukrainian oligarchs, etc.
Well, my kids are still in diapers, so I think it'd only take some carrots to probably bribe them. But it's possible. You could probably pull it off. Okay, so one of the big revelations we had at Breitbart was a photo of Joe, Hunter, and two top Kazakhstan officials at what appears to be Cafe Milano, an upscale eatery in Georgetown, a couple of miles from the White House. What do we need to know about this photo and about Hunter's dealings with Kazakhstan?
Great question. Well, this is another example where Joe Biden said he did not discuss, he didn't have contact with any of Hunter's business partners.
Other than the big dinner at Cafe Milano. That was the only time. Right?
Exactly. I don't know what was on the menu. I wish I knew. It's a great restaurant. But here's what we know. We know that one of the gentlemen in that picture, the gentleman to the left standing next to Hunter, it's a picture of Hunter and Joe, then vice president, and two Kazakh gentlemen. One of those Kazakh gentlemen is named Kangas Rakashev. We know, according to financial records that came out in a court trial, that he sent at least $142,000 into a Hunter Biden connected account. And there he is meeting with the vice president of the United States. And we know based on emails that came out that there were other meetings arranged between these Kazakh individuals and Vice President Joe Biden. So it shows this fact that Joe Biden says, well, I had no contact with his business partners. I didn't know what was going on with his business deals, is flat out not true. And that was a great bit of reporting, by the way, by Joel Pollack, because we got a picture from Kazakh officials, from a Kazakh human rights official saying, hey, you might want to look into this. We had no idea of the date of the picture. We had no idea where it was taken, but it was Joel that figured out the imprint on the curtain behind it was Cafe Milano in Washington, D.C. Great bit of detective work.
It was pretty funny. I was staring at it and I saw there was a logo in the background. And I said to Joel, "Do you know what this is?" And Joel got to the bottom of it really quick. It was really fun. Okay, but not fun in the sense that that's example number 2. And we haven't even talked about Ukraine. But I want to go straight to Russia, and I want you to tell me about Elena Botterina, who is really a organized crime boss of some sort in Russia, but also a business associate of Hunter Biden.
That's right. So we know a couple of things about this. Elena Botterina is the ex-wife of the mayor of Moscow, and she made billions of dollars while her husband was mayor. Figure out how that happened, right? So she's corrupt to begin with. But also you have these State Department cables that came out in WikiLeaks, where the Hillary Clinton State Department says that Elena Botterina is linked to Russian organized crime. In fact, one of the most notorious gangs in Russian organized crime. So here's what we know. We know that Hunter Biden, his firm got $3.5 million in a wire transfer from Elena Botterina. We know that because the Treasury Department flagged it. The Treasury Department monitors suspicious transactions involving suspicious people, like Elena Botterina would be. So they flagged it. We know that for a fact. We also know, based on the emails we obtained from Bevan Cooney, that Hunter Biden's firm actually set up Elena Botterina's accounts in the United States. And this is quite stunning. It shows the level of trust that she had with Hunter Biden and his firm, because in 2014, of course, Russia had gone into Ukraine. There was all kinds of talks about sanctions and sanctioning Russians. She was eager to get her assets out of Russia. So she contacted Rosemont, which is Hunter Biden's firm. It's a very small firm. And we literally have the emails where they are going to banks, trying to get banks to set up an account. And the banks agree to go along. They say that Elena Botterina is on a watch list because of the things that she's involved in, but they decide to set up the account because she hasn't been charged yet with a crime.
Wow.
That's the level of threshold. And there was discussion in some of the other corporate records involving this that Hunter Biden's firm actually had a $200 million deal with Elena Botterina, which is quite stunning. So when you talk about Russia collusion, certainly you have to wonder, is the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, being influenced by the fact that a Russian oligarch is giving $200 million to his son's firm to handle?
So there's one other thing that you kind of mentioned briefly, Bevan Cooney, who's one of I guess, estranged former Hunter Biden business partner and associate, who's, I guess, turned on Hunter and turned over a bunch of emails of his, personal emails and his interactions with Hunter to you, Peter, that we've been breaking at Breitbart, meticulously going through them. But he's got some other business partners, a guy named Devin Archer, who actually tried to defraud the Oglala Sioux tribe, which is the poorest tribe in the United States. Hunter doesn't keep great company, Peter. What's the story here?
No, it's a great point. Look, here's the interesting thing about Bevan Cooney, who has shared these emails with us. Bevan Cooney is in jail related to this Indian bond fraud scheme. And one of the reasons he's angry with Hunter Biden is, he sort of feels like he's the fall guy. He admits that he did things wrong and he made a mistake. But his partners in those deals were Devin Archer and Hunter Biden. And there was another individual, Jason Galanis, and there were a few others involved. Everybody was charged in that group. except Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden was the only one that was not charged criminally. But when you go through the records, the court documents involving this Indian bond scheme, the trial took place in 2016 through 2018, you see that Hunter Biden has his fingerprints all over this. So part of the reason that Bevan Cooney is angry is that Hunter Biden alone did not face charges in this. And the bond scheme was quite amazing. They basically convinced the Oglala Sioux, one of the poorest tribes in the United States, probably the poorest tribe, to let them issue bonds in their name to gather money, and they basically diverted that money for other purposes. Federal officials found out about it and charged everybody but Hunter Biden. And when you look at the testimony in that trial, a lot of people that got defrauded, some of these pension funds said part of the reason they invested is the vice president's son was involved. So it had to be a straight deal. It's really quite amazing. So it's the company that Hunter keeps, but it's also the fact that there does seem to be this two-tiered justice system in America today, that if you're a son of vice president, you can evade charges that other people can't.
Yeah, Peter Schweizer is with me. He's a senior contributor for Breitbart News, a best-selling author, and he's been breaking some big stories with us about the corruption of the Joe Biden family. I'm Alex Marlow, by the way, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, and I thank you for joining me. Whichever platform you're on, this is supposed to be platform agnostic. We'll share it all over the web as well as on SiriusXM Patriot, channel 125, on our morning radio show, Breitbart News Daily. So this will be all over the place, and thanks for tuning in and sharing it with someone. This is the information people need to have to understand what Joe Biden and his family are all about. And Peter, we haven't even mentioned Burisma in Ukraine yet. Is there anything to add beyond what's kind of in the general zeitgeist?
Well, I mean, look, I think a lot of people know that he was getting $1 million a year from a corrupt Ukrainian energy company. He had no background in energy. He had no background in Ukraine. We now know with emails that have been released that he was working at Burisma's direction to try to deflect investigations into Burisma, which is a very corrupt company run by corrupt oligarchs. And we also know that Joe Biden fired a prosecutor, threatened to withdraw U.S. aid to Ukraine if they didn't fire a prosecutor, and that prosecutor was looking into Hunter Biden's company, Ukraine. So massive conflict of interest. You see it all the time with Joe Biden. You saw it in China. You see it in Ukraine and in these other countries. But it shows the overwhelming pattern of how this family operates.
And Peter, do you find it interesting that the press still acts like that this is some sort of a hoax, that Joe Biden fired the prosecutor when he bragged about it at the Council on Foreign Relations, and it's on video that he bragged about getting the prosecutor fired and strong-arming him, and then they act like it's not a real story? How are they getting away with that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, what they say is there were other reasons to fire the prosecutor. Well, yeah, sure, there probably were, but that's not the point. The point is you should not be intervening as a public official. In fact, U.S. laws preclude this. You are not to be intervening in a situation that will materially help one of your family's commercial enterprises. And if you are firing a prosecutor that is investigating a company in which your son sits on the board of directors, that's definition of conflict of interest. So, again, it's an example, and we've talked about this before, Alex. If this were the Trump family, they would be all over this story. If it were the Trump family, you and I would be all over this story. But it's not the Trump family, it's the Biden family, and they just have a different standard. They're not as curious. They're willing to let a lot more slide, and it is destroying the brands of a lot of newspapers and publications that I continue to read. Sometimes I get very frustrated, but they are destroying their brands. They're destroying their brands in the name of trying to protect the Biden family.
Is there any legitimacy to these Hunter Biden deals, cutting these deals all over the world? Is there any justification or explanation other than that his last name is Biden?
This is what I ask people all the time. If you look at Donald Trump, if you look at Michael Bloomberg, these are two wealthy individuals that have operations around the world. Look at Donald Trump. I mean, he sells wine, he has resorts, he has golf courses. You look at Michael Bloomberg, he's selling information, business information. Sure. He's got, an array of products. The question that I keep asking is, What are the Bidens selling? I mean, what product, what service are they providing these Chinese companies? A Chinese energy company, they don't know anything about the energy business. They don't know anything about private finance. Right. A Chinese private equity company, they don't know anything about that. So the point is, these foreign entities are paying the Bidens money, millions of dollars to the Biden family. And the question is, what are they getting in return? The point is, these are not charities. These are not philanthropies. They are expecting and they are getting something in return, or they would stop paying the Bidens.
Yeah, and the answer to that is access or influence or both. So, Peter, that was merely the first member of the Biden five. So we've got four more to go. And let's talk about Frank Biden. Frank Biden received millions of dollars in taxpayer-funded loans. He got involved in a big Costa Rican energy company, though, as is the pattern, no background in energy. What do we need to know about Frank Biden?
Yeah, I mean, again, it fits the pattern. When Joe Biden becomes vice president of the United States, inaugurated in January 2009, it literally opens up the world for the Biden family. So Frank Biden, a guy who basically was a real estate agent, not very successful in Florida, suddenly decides he's going to go into the renewable energy business. Again, no background in any of that. Sets up companies in Costa Rica, sets up another company in Jamaica, and lo and behold, gets involved in deals that get taxpayer-backed, that means you and me, taxpayer-backed loans from the U.S. government, or more specifically from the Obama-Biden administration, to do renewable energy projects in Costa Rica and Jamaica.
How big were those loans, Peter?
One of them was $54 million. And the other one was a little bit less than that. This did not all go to Frank Biden, but Frank Biden was in the mix. And part of the problem with tracing this, Alex, is he's party to a deal. He brings, again, nothing to the table. He has no energy background, no expertise in constructing solar facilities. But he's party to it, and he got paid. He had a seat at the table, and the question is why? And I think the answer is why is he helped secure those transactions and got those taxpayer-backed loans.
So you're saying Joe Biden becomes vice president, and then Brother Frank decides, well, why don't I try my hand at the energy business? And lo and behold, he gets tens of millions of dollars in loans from the Obama administration. And we're supposed to act like this is some sort of a coincidence.
Yeah, exactly. And the other one you can look at is charter schools. I'm a big advocate of charter schools, as I know you are, but there's a business side to it. And Frank Biden exploited that as well, because he went into the charter school real estate business. Sure. Which actually leases and owns real estate connected to charter schools, which means that he was getting grants. These are grants that are discretionary, which means the Department of Education can decide who they want to give them to, who they don't. He took in millions of dollars in grants from the from the Education Department while his brother was vice president of the United States. He actually had a meeting involving his companies in the Oval Office with Barack Obama and just a couple of other individuals. If his name had been Frank Jones instead of Frank Biden, I doubt any of that would have happened.
Right. All right, now let's go to James Biden, who got a little bit of play in the last debate because he's the Biden that cut a gigantic deal in Iraq. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, another prime example. So James Biden gets involved with a construction company, a newly formed construction company. It begins in 2011 when Kevin Justice, who's a longtime Biden friend from Delaware, visits the White House, has meetings with Joe Biden's office. We don't know precisely who in the office, but he met with people in the office. 3 weeks after that meeting, lo and behold, Kevin Justice appoints Frank Biden, Joe's brother, as executive vice president of a newly formed construction company.
And I assume James Biden, Peter, is an expert construction guy. He's known far and wide for his acumen in this field.
Yeah, he probably at some point in his life has worn a hard hat. But that's about the extent of his background. He has no background in construction. So he is now executive vice president of this new construction company. And then within 6 months, they land these billion-dollar contracts to build homes in Iraq. This is part of the Iraqi reconstruction after the war. They're contractors to it. And who is in charge of Iraqi reconstruction at the time? Joe Biden, his brother. So
Whoa.
yet we've now got a third member of the family who, because of Joe's position, is cashing in. In this case, taxpayer money is flowing to a member of the Biden family.
So we're talking about a deal over $1 billion with outright grants from the American taxpayer to a Biden family member who had no background in construction to build homes.
To build homes in Iraq. That's correct.
Unbelievable. Okay, so it's not just the Biden men. The Biden ladies are also part of the mix here in the Biden five as well. Let's talk about Valerie. She is apparently an expert campaign manager who made a fortune running the campaigns of, I guess, Joe Biden. Tell me about her.
Yeah, Valerie Biden runs all of Joe Biden's campaigns until he ran for vice president. And that's very interesting. But when Joe Biden ran for the Senate, Delaware, obviously a very safe seat for him, hasn't been a Republican in there for 40 years. So what does Joe do? Joe hires his sister to run his campaign, hires her firm as a consultant. As a result, millions of dollars flow to Valerie Biden. She's really not working much on other campaigns, curiously. And what's interesting, of course, is that in 2008, when Joe Biden is picked to run with Barack Obama, the Obama people said, no, the sister's not running this campaign. We're going to have our own people do it. So there's another example. It's perhaps not as dramatic as the others, but it speaks to the pattern, which is the Bidens are looking opportunities to take money, whether it's taxpayer money, political money, or business money, and steer it to their family members for their benefit.
So basically, he hires his sister, who's not really doing other campaigns, but she does his, which is a safe seat. So he takes in money. He's obviously a draw for donors anyway, and she can just skim off the top, no questions asked. Totally legal, right, Peter? Though obviously corrupt.
Yeah, it's one of those examples of what in the old Tammany Hall days they call legal graft, meaning it's unethical, and I would argue it's corrupt, but it's certainly not illegal.
Okay, so now let's turn to Ashley Biden. Now, Ashley Biden's husband got involved with this new business called Startup Health, and this was a business that was a huge beneficiary of Obamacare. Walk us through the connection.
Yeah, so this is interesting because Howard Krein and his business partners actually bragged.
That's
about
the husband, Howard Krein, right?
Yeah, Howard Krein. Yeah, they actually bragged about the hookup that they got from Joe Biden, and it really begins in 2011. They're starting a company called Startup Health. Howard Krein, who is at this point engaged to Ashley Biden, described to his business partners, and then they relate it publicly about how Howard Krein, the future son-in-law, was talking to the vice president, and he said, I've got a couple business associates that are in Washington, D.C. We've started this new company, Startup Health. We're going to be in the healthcare space. We don't have a website yet, but we're looking to get started. And Joe Biden said, well, have them come to the White House. I'll introduce them to Barack. So they go to the White House, they meet in the Oval Office, Barack Obama is there, he greets them, they talk to them, they have their picture taken, they brag about it on the website that they end up building. But more importantly, Alex, they get a huge hookup. And the hookup is this federal government data conference that is for large, well-established healthcare providers. It's called Healthapalooza. Great name, right? For a healthcare conference. But it's very prestigious, very hard to get into. They get hooked up and they are put front and center in this very important conference. And that's the beginning of the favors that happen. What else happens? Well, Startup Health in 2011, it's going on. It still exists to this day. Between 2011 and 2016, Joe Biden is still vice president of the United States. What does Joe Biden do? Joe Biden actually goes several times and gives private speeches and briefings to the partners and investors in his son-in-law's business. Imagine
so I got to recap here and reset because this is unbelievable. So you've got a brand new company, the sister's fiance of the vice president, his company, and they don't have a website, they don't have a business plan. But not only do they get a big government contract, but they get an Oval Office meeting. And then when the company gets going, then the vice president starts lobbying investors.
Yeah, the vice president is giving speeches, and imagine the power of this, because in the Obama administration especially, there are all these major decisions that are being made, not by Congress, but by bureaucrats, people in the White House, about how certain healthcare matters are going to be handled. So if you are an investor, or you're thinking about investing in startup health, or you're thinking about being a partner with them, it's enormously attractive to know you can do a private briefing where there are questions and answers with the Vice President of the United States discussing and describing what healthcare policy is going to be in the future. And that goes up until 2016. Then the favor kind of gets returned, Alex, because once Joe Biden leaves the vice presidency, what does he do? He starts giving paid speeches for Startup Health, which is run by his son-in-law. We don't know how much he's paid. I also believe Joe Biden's wife, also gives a presentation for Startup Health.
And those aren't in any disclosures, how much he was paid for these?
No, because he'd be a private citizen at this point, so we would not know.
We were told he released everything we need to know about his financial history. It's all been out there.
Yeah, exactly. What we get is his tax returns, which means that we know that he went from basically having nothing to, within a matter of a couple of years, having a net worth of more than $9 million. I'm sure that speaking fees from Startup Health were probably part of that. There's been some more recent reporting, by the way, Alex, and I have to give credit. There's a reporter at Politico that broke this, which shows that Howard Klein's company, Startup Health, is moving into the space of COVID research.
Oh boy.
And what's interesting is the son-in-law, who of course owns part of that company, also lists himself as a COVID advisor to his father-in-law, Joe Biden. So again, another example of a conflict of interest.
Yeah, this is them getting ready to go in case Joe Biden gets in there. So, Peter, let me play devil's advocate here, because here's what anyone who's a strong Biden supporter is thinking right now. They're thinking, okay, there's a lot of smoke here. He's got a big family. They're just doing the only sensible thing to do, and they got a powerful brother or father or brother-in-law, whatever. And there's no evidence Joe got a kickback. How difficult would it be for Joe to conceal him wetting his beak in all this? And how much does that even matter to you, how much Joe got?
Yeah, I mean, it really ultimately doesn't matter if Joe Biden himself got paid, his family got paid. I mean, one of the reasons that politicians have to disclose the finances of their spouses, for example, is that corruption doesn't just entail the politician getting paid. If the kid gets a paving contract, if the kid gets a lobbying gig, that's all part of this same problem. And the Bidens, to me, are unprecedented in the extent and scope of the corruption, because I've been doing this for a long time. I've exposed Republicans and Democrats. The most that I've ever seen up to this point was a Republican senator from Missouri that had 3 family members engaged in this kind of behavior. The Bidens now have 5, making the Biden 5, in my mind, the reigning champs when it comes to corrupt behavior in Washington, D.C.
Okay, so Breitbart News senior contributor Peter Schweizer, author Profiles in Corruption, a bunch of other essential books. Last question, what do you think Joe Biden knew about these deals, and when do you think he knew it?
I think Joe Biden knew about all of them. I mean, when the Bidens aren't talking about business deals, they talk about how close they are, about how they spend all this time together, and they do. They go on vacation, they communicate all the time. So I believe a family dynamic is one way or the other. You're either a close-knit family or you're not. To me, it's impossible to believe you are close-knit socially, but you're not discussing your business ventures. And a lot of these deals that the family benefit from would not have happened except for the fact that Joe Biden knew that those deals were in play.
Peter, I can't thank you enough. Incredible reporting. Everyone make sure to share this video or clips if you see them. You got to get the word out. Time is scarce, and people need to know about the true nature of Joe Biden and his corrupt family. Thanks for listening. I'm Alex Marlow.